I will say the most damning part of her testimony for me is when she describes a freak-off where Diddy and another man, an escort, are standing on top of her while she is laying on the floor high off of ecstasy, and they are urinating on her face.
On May 14, 2025, Cassie Ventura underwent a rigorous cross-examination in the federal sex trafficking trial against Sean Diddy Combs. Defense attorney Anna Estevao sought to challenge Ventura's credibility by presenting text messages that depicted a seemingly affectionate and consensual relationship. These messages included discussions about freak-offs, drug use, and expressions of love, which the defense argued indicated mutual participation in the activities Ventura described as abusive. Despite the defense's efforts, Ventura maintained that her involvement in these activities was coerced and that she felt trapped in a cycle of abuse. She testified about the emotional and physical toll of her relationship with Combs, including incidents of violence and manipulation. Ventura also recounted a 2018 incident where she alleged Combs raped her after their breakup, leading to a suicide attempt in early 2023. The court proceedings were emotionally charged, with Ventura visibly distressed during parts of her testimony. The judge overseeing the trial expressed concern over the length and nature of the cross-examination, especially considering Ventura's advanced pregnancy. The defense is expected to conclude their questioning by the end of the week, after which the prosecution will have the opportunity for redirect examination. For a detailed account of the cross-examination, you can watch the following news coverage. You sit there, watching closely, because this isn't just Cassie telling her story anymore. Now she's being questioned for it, and the courtroom feels colder for it. The cross-examination begins with defense attorney Anna Estevao flipping through screenshots of old text messages, projecting them onto a screen for the jury to see. Messages that show Cassie using affectionate language toward Diddy, joking about parties, and even referencing freak-offs, the same events she described as coercive and traumatic during direct testimony. Is this you expressing love, Ms. Ventura? Estevao asks. Cassie pauses. Yes, she says. But that doesn't mean I wasn't afraid. That's the line that lands hardest. Because for anyone paying attention, it cuts deeper than the defense might have expected. Cassie's message is simple. Abuse isn't always loud. Sometimes it hides in plain sight. Behind emojis, inside forced smiles, between the lines of a text message typed under pressure. The defense tries to paint her as inconsistent, as if the pain she described can't exist alongside moments of tenderness. But Cassie holds her ground, calmly explaining that survival often looks like complicity. You learn how to keep the peace, she says, even when you're not okay. And suddenly you see the strategy. The defense isn't just trying to discredit her, they're trying to recode the entire relationship, make it look consensual, make it seem romantic. But in doing that, they're asking the jury to ignore the patterns, the isolation, the violence, the fear. You ask yourself, why are victims expected to have perfect timelines and emotionless text records just to be believed? What does proof look like when you're trying to survive? And why is love, real or manipulated, used as evidence against those who claim they were abused? Because Cassie's not just fighting for her truth, she's fighting to explain what trauma really looks like. Segment 3. You said 3, and you can still incorporate some of the real news you did, just intertwine it with our Originella structure. ChatGPT said, Segment 3. Now things get heavier. Cassie's voice doesn't crack, but the weight behind it is unmistakable. Because the questions aren't just about her words, they're about her sanity, her memories, her pain. The defense leans in hard, pressing her on why she stayed, why she still texted I love you, why she didn't leave sooner. You hear it coming, that question every survivor dreads. If it was so bad, why didn't you just leave? The courtroom holds its breath. Cassie looks down for a moment, then lifts her eyes and responds, because I didn't think I could survive outside of him. And there it is, the answer so many people struggle to understand. Because this wasn't just a relationship, it was a system, a trap. One that, as she now reveals under oath, left her so emotionally battered that she attempted suicide in early 2023. The room goes quiet. She testifies that the 2018 rape she previously disclosed happened after they broke up. He came to her hotel room, she says, and forced himself on her. That's when something inside her broke completely. This moment, now publicly confirmed during cross-examination, becomes the most haunting part of the entire exchange. She doesn't flinch when describing it. She's done shrinking her pain for other people's comfort. That wasn't love, she says. That was control. But the defense continues. They present more messages, some showing Cassie scheduling travel to meet Diddy, others making jokes that now feel jarring in hindsight. They push the idea that she had agency, that she wanted this lifestyle. But as she explains, wanting safety is not the same as wanting abuse. And often, survivors navigate life in survival mode, appeasing, agreeing, smiling, just to keep the violence at bay. You ask yourself, When did we start confusing politeness under pressure for consent? Why do we weaponize coping mechanisms against the people who had no other option? And how much more does she have to relive just to be believed? Because today, Cassie didn't just face her abuser. She faced a system that still treats survival as contradiction. Now, the courtroom feels like a war zone, but not because of shouting, because of what's not being said. The defense isn't just picking apart Cassie's timeline. They're trying to poke holes in her humanity. They circle back to the infamous freak-offs, sex parties that Cassie has testified were coerced, drug-fueled, and recorded by Diddy. But under cross-examination, the defense attorney presents messages where she appears to joke about them, mentions of travel plans, outfits, casual emojis, used to build a case that Cassie was a willing participant. "You spoke about these events with humor," the attorney says. Cassie responds without hesitation. "Humor was how I coped. That's what they don't understand. When you're in it, when your whole world revolves around pleasing a man who holds all the power, your smile becomes your survival suit." The jury listens, some nodding slowly, because now the case isn't about whether abuse occurred. It's about what it looked like. And it didn't always look like screams or bruises. It looked like red carpet photos, romantic getaways, text messages laced with trauma. She recounts how, during one of those trips, she tried to back out. Diddy, she says, exploded, threw her phone, accused her of betrayal. That night, the party still happened. She went. Because what choice did she have? Meanwhile, the judge, concerned about Cassie's mental and physical state, briefly interrupts the defense's line of questioning. She's in the later stages of pregnancy, and her distress is beginning to show. The judge allows a short recess. "She's not just a witness," one court reporter whispers. "She's still surviving." You start to ask yourself, how do we expect trauma to be tidy? Why do we ask survivors to perform their pain like courtroom theater? And when someone finally chooses to speak, why do we make them relive every minute to earn our belief? Because Cassie's not just testifying, she's enduring all over again. And every word she speaks is evidence, not just of what happened, but of what society still refuses to see. By now, the strategy is obvious. The defense isn't trying to disprove the abuse. They're trying to blur it, to turn Cassie's trauma into a confusing mess of mixed messages, out-of-context texts, and assumptions about what a real victim should look like. You feel it, that familiar shift from empathy to skepticism, a tactic used to wear witnesses down until they second-guess their own pain. And yet, Cassie stays steady. She's asked why she continued to travel with Diddy, why she stayed in his homes, why she didn't cut off contact. She answers the same way every time. Because I didn't feel safe leaving, and because when I tried, there were consequences. The court falls still again, because beneath that calm voice is a truth that so many women live but rarely say aloud. You can be abused and still show up. You can be afraid and still say, "I love you." You can want peace and still get pulled back into chaos. And the prosecution knows it. They sit quietly, letting the defense press, letting Cassie hold the line, because her answers speak louder than the questions. Then comes the moment that shifts the mood completely. Cassie is shown a message she sent Diddy in 2021, months before she finally left. It's short, just 5 words. "I can't do this anymore." It's not dramatic, not even angry, but in that line you feel the exhaustion, the quiet surrender, the moment before escape. And suddenly, everything the defense is trying to frame, every screenshot, every emoji, every "I miss you," feels paper thin. Because abuse doesn't always leave with bruises. Sometimes it lingers in your inbox. Sometimes it sounds like love because you had to call it that just to survive. You ask yourself, what if proof of abuse isn't something you can screenshot? How many survivors carry their pain like a secret in their own text history? And when someone finally says, "I can't do this anymore," why does the world still ask them to explain why not? Because Cassie's not performing for the jury. She's fighting for the truth. The questions grow sharper now, not because they're clearer, but because they're cutting in all the wrong places. The defense knows Cassie hasn't broken, so now they test her edges, bringing up her financial gain from the music industry, her past settlements, and her silence over the years. "Why didn't you speak up sooner? You benefited from this lifestyle, didn't you? Isn't it true you waited until after the statute of limitations for certain charges had passed?" Every question is loaded, everyone meant to cast doubt, not on the facts, but on her motives. And Cassie answers like someone who's carried this weight for far too long. "I stayed silent because I was afraid. I'm speaking now because I'm not anymore." You can hear the audience shift. Some people sit up straighter. Even the stenographer stops typing for just a second. Because no matter how calm the courtroom appears on the surface, this is the battle survivors always face. The idea that the moment you speak, everything you've ever done is fair game for dissection. Suddenly, the court isn't just judging Diddy, They're judging Cassie's wardrobe, her tone of voice, her financial history, her Instagram captions, her career. It's not about the abuse anymore. It's about whether or not she's worthy of being believed. And that's the trick, isn't it? If you cry too much, you're unstable. If you cry too little, you're cold. If you stayed too long, it wasn't abuse. If you left too fast, it wasn't real. You begin to understand why so many victims never speak. Because in a courtroom, or even worse, in public opinion, the truth isn't always enough. You ask yourself, why do we treat survivors like suspects? How much of someone's past should they have to relive just to prove what they endured? And when will we start recognizing that speaking up isn't weakness? It's the ultimate strength? Cassie isn't crumbling. She's clarifying. Not just for herself, but for every woman who has ever wondered if her pain would be taken seriously once it left the privacy of her mind and entered the public eye. And just like that, Cassie's cross-examination ends. Not with a breakdown, not with a contradiction, but with a silence so heavy it drowns the noise. She sits back in her seat, exhausted, still, composed. The judge calls for a recess. The jury exhales. But the room? It doesn't relax. Because what just unfolded wasn't just a legal exchange, it was a public reckoning. The defense tried everything. They brought texts, pictures, travel logs. They poked at timelines, questioned emotions, dissected choices. But what they couldn't erase was her truth. And more importantly, they couldn't change what the jury, and the public, had now seen for themselves. A woman who stayed quiet for years because she was scared. A woman who spoke up not for money, but for peace. A woman who stood on the witness stand, pregnant and exhausted, to reclaim what she lost in silence. Outside the courtroom, the conversation is shifting again. We hear Cassie trends for the third day straight. Survivors begin sharing their own "why I didn't leave" stories. Even skeptics begin posting things like, "You can't fake that kind of pain." And Diddy? Still no testimony, still no public response. Because right now, every word spoken in court has done more than any statement ever could. You ask yourself, what happens when truth is finally louder than reputation? How many more women are watching Cassie and thinking, maybe it's time I speak too? And if someone with everything to lose still stood up there and said it anyway, what excuse do the rest of us have for not listening? Cassie didn't win today with facts or footage. She won with endurance. And the world